On Monday, we told you about a 45-year-old autistic man who died in a house fire on the Saugeen First Nation. His sister, Alma Mae Scott, is searching for answers, wanting to know why her autistic brother died while waiting for services. Services are made available to those living with disabilities off reserve, but because her brother lived on reserve, he had no help. Last September, Man Scott filed 2 complaints to the Human Rights Commission, but Man Scott says nothing is happening. T.R. Wilson with more.
These are tears of anger and frustration. Alma Man Scott is preparing to bury her brother Randy. He was autistic, and because Saugeen had no money for caregivers, he was mostly helpless when fire erupted at the house he was staying at on reserve.
I'm wondering why my brother had to die waiting for services.
Man Scott had tried to get help for her brother. Last year, she filed complaints with the Manitoba and Canadian Human Rights Commission. Her argument was simple. Every time she went for help to the province or Ottawa, both levels of government passed the buck on who was responsible to pay for care. Saugeen First Nation can't afford to pay. They don't get a cent to help the 50 disabled people currently living on reserve.
They have to listen to this. How many more people are going to have to die?
But the story doesn't stop there, because Alma Man Scott has an autistic grandson, and she didn't want him to die, so she decided on a painful decision. She packed up her grandson and moved him off reserve, where the province would pay for his services that he couldn't get at home. In 2007, a private member's bill known as Jordan's Principle was passed in the House of Commons. Jordan River Anderson of Norway House was a handicapped boy who lived all his 4 years in a hospital. He died while the province and feds argued over who should pay his medical bills. Jordan's Principle was supposed to make sure children like Man Scott's grandson wouldn't fall between the cracks of bureaucracy. But that isn't happening, and the province still refuses to spend any money for on-reserve health care. That's why Man Scott finally turned over her grandson to a child welfare agency.
I don't think that having a First Nations member in your family should become a child custody issue, but it is. Just so he could have services, and because I wanted him to have what he needs, I voluntarily surrendered my guardianship temporarily.
This child advocate is outraged.
If government can provide the services in a foster home, they should be able to provide them in the child's natural family home with their parents and brothers and sisters and extended family around them. That's what Jordan's Principle was all about. If Manitoba would have accepted the broad and proper definition of Jordan's Principle, this child would receive the services that he or she needs in their family home instead of having to be placed in foster care.
APTN failed to get a comment from the provincial government. A spokesperson said it's a question for Ottawa. In the meantime, people with disabilities continue to go into foster care off reserve, the only way they can get the help they need. T.R. Wilson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.